Hello and welcome to DM&D Chat. We had a break last week here, but we are back again this week. And here on the House of Gamers server, I am Jim, aka Argent Wind. I am one of the dungeon masters here on the server here for our D&D groups. And I had to say now we should be calling it RPG groups. We have a full-blown Traveler game going now, so we aren't just D&D anymore. That's what brings up what we're going to talk about tonight. Today we're going to be talking about alternatives or options for other game systems you may want to run to, maybe even other genres as well. Uh, just to get the elephant in the room, the OGL thing has been a big controversy, a big push thing, and I'm not going to talk about that a lot tonight. But I do want to mention, because of that, a lot of people are looking to switch systems to try something different, and actually it's kind of a good thing. I've played a lot of different systems, and they're all a lot of fun and a lot of different genres and everything else. And so D&D isn't the only game out there. Today I'm going to offer up some alternatives. Some of you may have seen these before. Some of you may not have. Some of these might be things that you've heard of but never seen any details about here. So we're just going to kind of go through again uh, our alternatives to just the good old D&D 5e. So first thing you're going to see, the big change a lot of people are doing right now is jumping from 5e to Pathfinder, especially Pathfinder 2e, second edition Pathfinder. There's a really crazy history of D&D and its editions, starting back in the 70s with the original D&D sets here, through Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, through D&D 3.0, 3.5, and then that's where the waters get a little muddy for this whole thing, because you had issues with original company TSR that had some difficulties and some issues around what they wanted to license and not license and everything else. And that's when Wizards of the Coast stepped in and Hasbro stepped in and bought D&D. But there's this whole thing of like, what's ours? What do we get with this? So what ended up happening is right around that 3.5 mark for D&D, Pathfinder, a group that came up here and created an alternative to D&D, because D&D moved to 4th edition. And I'll just say this, 4th edition is not a role-playing game. It's got a lot of elements that are similar, but it's really more of a tactical miniatures combat game, which is fun. It has very much an MMO style feel to it, that kind of rotation of abilities you run through for your classes. It had a much more feel. It's much more like Warcraft or other MMOs in terms of how you use your abilities. So not a bad thing specifically, but not the same thing that people were looking for. And so Pathfinder came out as sort of we all called it D&D 3.75. And so that one kind of moved forward as Wizards moved off to Pathfinder to D&D 4.0. And then 5.0 came out and the hobby exploded. Thanks to, of course, content like Critical Role and a lot of other streaming services out there. Just the hobby got a lot more traction, a lot more press, and just more and more people wanting to play, which is a great thing for the hobby. But with that, everyone was piling onto the same game. Everyone was playing D&D, which, again, I love D&D. I always have. I mean, I've got my shrine to all of my editions up there. But I will say that since this has happened, and as people kind of have been playing D&D for a number of years, they start to get a little jaded, maybe want to try something different. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. First off, differences between D&D and Pathfinder. I want to switch systems there. The big difference, and you're going to hear this term used, I'm going to use this term tonight there, and you may have heard this out there, is the idea of crunchiness. How crunchy is the system? And crunch there's a lot of different definitions, and I'm not going to go into that mine is the correct one, but there's 3 aspects to a game that kind of gets into how much crunch that it has. First of all, what are your character creation options? How detailed is your character creation? How long does it take to make a character? And what goes into it? How many, like, your class, race, character abilities, equipment, all something like that. So really, the idea of how much crunch a system has is, again, first off, how complicated is the character creation? Second is how complicated is it to play the game itself? How many rules do you have to go through? How simple is the dice rolling mechanic and the ability systems and everything else? And then thirdly, how how many options are there for character advancement as you grow with your character? How detailed is the character leveling up system, or the ways that you create that you level advance your characters? And so those three things, I will say that between D&D 5e and Pathfinder, especially Pathfinder Second Ed, Pathfinder has much more crunch in all aspects. First of all, there are a lot more classes and races. um, a lot more options for different classes, a lot more different what they call ancestries, and then backgrounds and heritage, and then you have then your then your actual class. Oh, and then as you move up in level, you have also beyond that, you have feats at almost every level where you get heritage feats and ancestry feats and archetypes and everything else that lives up there. So this the leveling up process for Pathfinder has a lot more options to it, just dozens and dozens of feats. And every level you're getting something new. So again, a lot of crunch around that. And then gameplay. The thing about Pathfinder is that everything you want to do has rules associated with it. You want to jump, here are the rules. If you want to jump better than somebody else, there's a feat for that. And so you basically have ways to advance and get better at jumping, better at tripping, better at grappling, better at talking to people, earning income, crafting. Everything in Pathfinder has rules, and so there's a lot of ways to tell you. You want to know how to do something? Pathfinder has a rule for it, and it has a feat to make it better. So again, Pathfinder, much more crunchy than D&D. D&D sort of leaves it up to the DM. What do you want to do with it? How do you want to handle it? Here are some guidelines. Here are some basics. Here are some rules for these things. But if you want to modify them, go for it. So again, there's a little more free-form aspect to that. D&D still has a lot of crunch around its rules and a lot of specifics on how things work. There's a lot less rigidity in terms of what those actions are. So again, that level of crunch there is a big difference between D&D and Pathfinder. And I'm currently playing in a Pathfinder 2e game. I played in a mini campaign a little while ago, and I'm playing in a new. We've only had our second session now, and it is sort of like there's a lot more. How does that work again? What is this rule? What is this thing here? And we're only first level characters, so it's one of those things that as you play, it gets more familiar, it gets easier. You don't have to actually spend all your time looking things up there. And depending on the tools you use, if you're using like a good a virtual tabletop like Roll20, and especially we're using Foundry, it has everything built into it, where you basically click on this and it rolls what you need. It grabs the skill you need to have, and it pops it into the chat. So those kind of things really help interpret those rules. Having online character builders like D&D Beyond has, there's a site for Pathfinder 2e called Path Builder, which lets you basically just unlock all the options and build characters from 1 to max level. And goes through all your options and everything else. So Path Builder is a good way if you want to jump in and see how character creation works. That's an option you have available to you. So Pathfinder, D&D, but let's say you want to run a fantasy game but don't want to use either of those. And we'll get into some comments here about come back around here on some of these things here with Pathfinder. So if you have experiences with Pathfinder and you have experiences with D&D and want to kind of throw things in the chat there, we'll come back around on this in the second half of the show there to kind of talk about those things. I see Dragon's already popped something in there about Pathfinder, which I definitely want to talk about later on. So, but to move into other fantasy-based games, let's say you want to leave behind your D20 and your other things. These next 4 systems are going to show you don't actually use D20s or anything else but in all cases but one, a D6 or multiple D6s. The first system, I'm going to go through these games in order of least crunch to most crunch. And again, these are all fantasy-based games here. At least in the context we're going to be talking about them here. And then we'll talk about some other genres down the road here. But first off, I'm going to talk about the Fate system. Specifically, I ran a campaign, mini campaign there in Dresden Files, which is an urban fantasy, a modern day fantasy setting there based on the works from Jim Butcher, one of my favorite authors, the Dresden Files. the exploits of a modern day wizard living in Chicago and all the craziness he deals with vampires and werewolves and ghosts and all kinds of crazy shapeshifting monsters and everything and demons and you name it, he's had to deal with it. But Dresden Files uses the Fate system. And Fate is a little bit different there. It uses D6s, but the six-sided dice only have either a plus, a blank, or a minus as the sides of the faces. And so basically every plus counts toward a success, every minus counts against you, and every blank die is neither has no effect. But what makes Fate interesting is the way you can modify these dice. You can nudge these dice from a neutral to a plus. You can re-roll some dice. So Fate is a really one thing about Fate 2 is it's also very much narrative based. If you can describe a way that your character gets a benefit for something, then you'll get those benefits. So a quick view of a character sheet in Fate. You can see there's not a lot to it. You have literally you can't see this very closely here, but there's not a lot on this page. You have aspects, your high concept. What is your character all about? In the case of Harry Dresden here, he is a wizard private eye. So anything that might go to being a private eye and a wizard, he can then probably get bonuses for. You're always going to have a trouble, or what's sort of your difficulty, your sort of your foil as they call it there. And his is the temptation of power, always trying to gain more power, but it's also a lure or a trap sometimes for a person. And you have other aspects as well. And so other aspects are going to be a little more general, like strong as a mountain or sly as a fox, or in the case of Harry here, epic wise ass. Um, there are things that where you can explain how that benefits you in a situation. You can then get a bonus to your dice or some or to the test you're trying to make. They can also be used against you to gain what are known as called fate points. And fate points are the currency that you can kind of use to re-roll dice or to nudge dice or get an extra success for a test or anything else like that. And you have a limited number of those and ways to get them back throughout the system there. Other than that, you have skills and then stunts and powers. And your skills are going to be what are you good at? What are you not so good at there? And there's going to be various aspects of things like, obviously, like endurance, intimidation, athletics, things like that. Your typical skill type things like that. And you set your levels of what you're really good at and what you're okay at. And then stunts and powers are going to be things like, in the case of a wizard, maybe a spell that you have or some specialized gear that you have. And you using your currency, your skill points, to power those effects throughout encounters. So advancement is basically you get a little bit more points to spend towards skills, or a little bit. You get a little bit better at those stunts and powers. You may alter an aspect or gain a new aspect based on the role play you've done throughout the game. And so it's really, again, sort of a narrative based game. It's not super crunchy when it comes to creation. It's you basically make up a story for a character and assign some values, and you're off and running. When it comes to gameplay, it's a very simple mechanic. You have a set difficulty. You roll your dice. Your pluses get added toward it. Your minuses get taken away. Use your fate points to adjust. Use your abilities to adjust, and then see if you succeed at the test. And then advancement, you really, again, it's just little nudges here and there that your character gets better at certain things as it goes along. So again, Resident Files, the Fate universe. The Fate has a generic rule system, and there are genres around other fantasy settings beside this one. This is the one that I happen to have. So again, Fate system. Next, we're going to talk about the Age system, or the Advanced Game Engine. So Fate is from Evil Hat, or at least Evil Hat Productions. The Age system is from Green Ronin Press. And the version of Age I played was the Dragon Age. This literally is the Dragon Age from the video games from BioWare. This setting in the world of Thetis with your mages and warriors and rogues. The Age system is a great, fairly simple system. A little more crunch in terms of building characters, a little more details around how you level up and advance. Sorry, one sec. All right. Um, but the character sheets in Age are based around you have attributes on one side here, and those attributes might have a focus. So an attribute is communication. You may have a focus in persuasion. So in tests where you're going to be doing those kind of things, you're going to be rolling 3d6, and you're going to be uh, try and adding in your attribute and adding in your focus if you have it, and it's applicable stunts and powers you might have. Wow, sorry. So um, you then have your equipment, your class abilities and powers, and then talents. That's all you really have in terms of character sheets. Now, what makes it age interesting? Excuse me. What makes it interesting is the dragon die. You have 3d6 that you're going to roll, and one of them will be a different color, known as the dragon die. And what happens is that the dragon die matches one of the other two dice, you get stunt points. And the stunt points they can be added in to get special actions, either in combat or out of combat or with spells. And so they can be things like getting an extra attack or getting a more powerful attack, or with magic, maybe not using any mana points for casting that spell, or having a cool follow up ability. And the moral of the story is don't inhale uh, things that aren't air. Uh, so the Dragon Die allows you to add and make actual like extra effects based on the amount of points you get on the stunt die. And there's other ways you can use the stunt die or the Dragon Die, specifically around extended tests. The Dragon Die comes into effect there. But really, it's not a super complicated system there. It's basically going to be a difficulty. You set your dice there. What adds this level of crunch to it is the fact that this Dragon Die can add in a total wild card into how the tests work out. So, character advancement is going to be sort of on a path. If you happen to be a warrior or mage or a rogue, you might have class abilities you gain or ways that you can enhance the stunts that you do, or maybe stunts cost less points, or you get extra foci for various actions or better specialized gear or specialized attacks or anything else. So, um, so literally, um, you just kind of advance there, and it's very similar. It has a very similar feel to the Dragon Age video games, especially the first one, the Dragon Age Origins. But it isn't totally that, and there's a pretty decent amount of customization you can do here. The thing about the Age system there is a second edition of Age coming out next month, and so I'm going to actually be looking into that one here. Because I want to see if they've fleshed out the stunt system and had a little more balance in there. But I'm definitely going to be um, definitely looking into the new edition of Age. And Age does have other genres as well. They have a modern Age game. They have some other Age specific games here, but they have a generic fantasy setting for Age, and of course the Dragon Age setting is here as well that I've used. Um, so yeah, check it out there. The Age system, the advanced game engine system from Green Ronin Press. Green Ronin Press. So yeah, fun times. Um, Next, we're going to jump into these next two systems are both extremely crunchy. And when you see them, if you've had any experience with them, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. So first off, in any game system, there a classic version you're going to see is going to be GURPS, generic universal role-playing system. Literally, GURPS has a hand in every genre you can imagine. And GURPS is also working on a new edition. Just kind of hot off the news here. Steve Jackson Games is a publisher for GURPS there, and they are talking about a new edition of GURPS. And literally with GURPS, you build your characters by points, and so it's very very crunchy in the fact that you can build anything you want. It's going to be based off of your skills, your attributes, sorry, your attributes and your skills, and then advantages. And so attributes are going to be things like strength and dexterity, typical things. Your skills are going to be anywhere, depending on the genre, from hunting to survival aspects to knowledge skills to athletics and acrobatics and those kind of things like that. Typical skills. And they go into a lot more granularity with very specific things. In the modern age, they like language skills, having gesture as a language type, your literacy level, your sign language as a language type. Stuff there. The idea, but then in combat, you have things like even from like lasso and net. Like every weapon is its own skill essentially. So you want to be good with swords, you take the sword skill and rank up your sword skill. Um, but you can have all kinds of things. There's ranged weapons and melee weapons in there. And the generic GURPS version here is sort of a pseudo-modern setting. So you're going to see some firearms rules in there. So obviously, based on the setting that you're going to be in, you may not have those options. But what's interesting about GURPS is that for the generic system, there are specific settings books that go along with it. So if you want to run a superhero game, there's a GURPS Supers, and then various settings that go along with that. If you want a fantasy game, there's a GURPS Magic and a GURPS Fantasy book that gives very specific details around the monsters and spells and abilities there. Now, I will say this. The reason why this is so crunchy is you've got everything you could possibly imagine, and it's all points. You have example, 100 points to spend. You basically spend your points across all those things you want to do, and it's this sort of balancing act of well, this I can move this down here to add 5 more points here and take 5 points off of there to put this over here. And so there's a lot of it's a lot of balancing when it comes to building characters. You also have disadvantages you can add to get some bonus points back. And the disadvantages are going to be things like having phobias or having some sort of physical limitation of some kind, having some sort of other mental issues, or having a rival who's going to basically be a problem for you, or a nemesis who's always trying to thwart your plans. You can build that into your character as ways of having getting points back. You get bonus points for that, and it gives you more points to spend on other abilities and everything else. So I will say this. GURPS has the most insane magic system I've ever seen. The GURPS magic book there, I do data for a living. I do data analysis and everything for a living here. This stretches my skills with data analysis to a point that's kind of crazy sometimes. It is a full-on flowchart. You want to cast a fireball, you need to know how to produce flame, how to shape flame, how to project flame, how to those are 3 basic spells you need to have. Then you usually have to have like either 1 or 2 intermediate spells to get up to the more powerful fireball spell. It's just kind of nuts. And so those all cost points. And so if you want to get to this certain level of spell, you got to go through all this little flow chart to get to what you want. It's a little crazy, and I hope that in future versions or in other editions of this, I have been told that other editions don't go into that level of detail that the GURPS Magic System does, but woof, it's a lot. But I will say, once it's built, it's kind of fun. It's actually a really simple game to play. It's a basic system there. You got your stuff there. The level of crunch in this game really comes from the creation of a character, and then advancement. You get experience points that just translate into more points to spend on abilities. So you literally have the level of crunch for GURPS really comes from which creating the character, and then kind of which settings are you going to pull from. I will say I've got GURPS Auto Duel, GURPS Vikings, GURPS Wildcards for that superhero setting. There's all kind, you name it. You name a genre, GURPS has a source book for it there, for every type of campaign scenario or world you want to run in. And of course, you can always customize whatever you want in there too. So again, there's a lot to this, but I mean, that's also a strength of it. There's a lot of options to it and a lot of different ways to go. So GURPS, crunchy. Not so much gameplay wise, but very crunchy. And then we're going to go to our crunchiest system, and I will just say, if you already know this one, you can probably call it out there in terms of fantasy idea systems that are used for fantasy games. Hero system. Hero system. It's crazy. Hero system has, I've run a fantasy hero and played in a fantasy hero campaign. Hero system again is a generic role playing system there where you can pretty much run in any different genre. It's built mostly around the idea of superheroes and the idea and the campaign world of champions. But there's also translations to other genres as well. I have Cyber Hero that I played. It's a very cyberpunk based game here, and I played quite a bit of Fantasy Hero. What makes Hero different is it's also like GURPS. It's a point buy system, but there's a lot more detail in the attributes that you have. You buy your attributes, but then there's calculated attributes that come off of those. So there was a lot of so literally, like if you want to, your endurance is 4 times whatever you spend on Constitution. Constitution stat there lends into your endurance. Your endurance you then use to fuel your powers or to make your attacks or whatever else you're doing. So if you fire a bow, it takes two endurance to fire your bow, and if you have 12 endurance, you have six shots before you need to recover in some way to get some of that energy back. There's a lot of like give and take there. But I will say you can do anything you want to do with hero. You can build any ability, any type of hero, any type of item you want to make. For example, I'm just going to go into this real quick example here on how Fantasy Hero would build an item. Wand of Fireballs. You would have a obvious accessible focus. So this is the thing here, which is going to lower the cost of your powers. You're basing off of Energy Blast, fire as the effect. Certain number, it's 5 points per die, so a 6-point fireball would be a 6-die fireball would be 30 points. Obvious accessible focus is a limitation on that power that lowers the cost. In fact, it actually cuts the cost in half, so now it's 15 points. Now you want to add charges. That's another limitation that'll lower the cost. But it's also area effects. That's an advantage that's going to increase the cost. And so you basically go through this push and pull of adding advantages and limitations. You might have an attack roll associated with it, or that requires maybe an activation roll that requires you to activate the wand. So there's all these limitations and advantages that go on the powers to raise and lower the cost. Again, it gets into a lot of math, and in terms of adding in fractions and percentages of the cost and everything else. And that's not even getting into the idea that Hero has what's called frameworks, which are groupings of powers that you can get that all kind of go together. Think Batman's utility belt. All those things are different powers that he has on his belt there, and depending on how he configures it, he has all different things. All these different powers that are related. Then you have getting into crazy people like high level mages might have a whole grouping of spells that they have. So the power costs get really, really nuts. And so the level of detail to build in a hero character is kind of nuts. Gameplay is fairly crunchy as well because you have this whole like action economy thing of your speed is based on how many actions you get, and that's one of your stats you have, and you can have abilities that increase your speed or lower your speed, and then you're having it. There's a lot to it. I'll just say that. But I will say I've had a lot of fun with Hero over the years. I've played Fantasy Hero and Champions both, and building that character out once it's built, advancing a character is sort of like taking experience points and respending them, or figuring out can I get an ability that costs this amount of powers? Well, let's add these abilities and limitations onto it. And again, it's not for the faint of heart when it comes to people doing math. I will say that. But again, you like crunch, Hero is the crunchiest you're going to get in general. Now, other genres. Just to kind of, you want to step away from fantasy. As I said, a lot of these systems have other genres they apply to. There's a modern age system. There's champions. There's fantasy hero, cyber hero. There's GURPS of every genre you can think of, and even Fate has multiple genres, different settings they can use for that system. But there is also Shadowrun. It's cyberpunk with magic, and the Shadowrun system is very crunchy. It's uh, pretty close to hero in some ways. It can take hours to build a character, and going through some of the gameplay, there's a lot of dice rolls and a lot of mechanics around things. And advancing is just as difficult in terms of adding more points onto a character. So really, Shadowrun is what on the crunchier end of the system there, but it's a lot of fun. There's Traveler. As we have a game here on our Discord server that as a Traveler game going now, where basically your character building is literally building your life, your adolescence, your career through the military or through whatever organization that you're part of throughout your idea there, and then mustering out or retiring, um, retiring the character in order to go on to adventures to whatever they're doing now. So you have this you kind of build the character's life and what abilities and attributes and skills you get from those different aspects of your life there is what you use to build your character. And then the character goes off to have adventures based with all that knowledge behind them. Fun system. So it's probably very much a sci-fi game. Um, Superhero games. They mentioned hero system, but there's also mutants and masterminds. There's villains and vigilantes. There's all different ways that you could apply, like obviously hero groups and some other systems here to the superhero genre as well. If you want to get into some horror aspects, well, there's White Wolf for like vampire and werewolf games. Vampire the Masquerade is a White Wolf game. There's also for horror, nothing beats Call of Cthulhu. You want eldritch horror, you want crazy enough here. Call of Cthulhu is the great way to bring about to establish some horror games. And the one thing about Call of Cthulhu games here is never get attached to your character. They're probably not going to make it through the game alive, and they're probably going to, or they're not going to be sane at the end. And you're probably going to have multiple character sheets because they're going to go through them. I did play in a Call of Cthulhu game where I actually went through 4 characters. My 4th one did finish out the game, but the first 3 all got killed. Um, uh, you want to jump into other things, like some familiar things like Star Wars and Star Trek. They have their own role playing systems there, and that Star Wars has many versions. The Star Trek role playing game is a pretty cool new game system that I played recently. Um, we had some dystopian weird sci-fi things here, and play some Paranoia, where again, don't get attached to your character. You're playing a bunch of clones, and a crazy computer is out to kill you. Um, so all these different genres to play in. Pick a genre, either they're guaranteed there's a game for it. And you can always get into some other systems of making your own versions of some of these games as well. A lot of, with the generic role-playing games, you can establish whatever game you want. I will be running my next campaign. I'm going to run after Avarice does complete somewhere down the road here. Will be in the age system. I'm going to use the age system for that one here. So I'm looking forward to kind of designing some things around that down the road here. But yeah, I'm going to switch it up to a different system in the future here. But before I jump into some questions, I did want to give a shout out here because do see Zach is in here. Zach has brought me in to work to help with a game world that he has created. And he's run a number of campaigns, and I got to play in one of those campaigns. That setting is called Wuthering, and it is literally a dystopian, post-apocalyptic fantasy world with all kinds of weird. It's kind of a blend of eldritch horror aspects with typical fantasy, with various. I can't even describe it to its full extent here, but at some point in the future, we'll see when here. I'm going to bring Zach on here to talk about this system here, but it will be run in the Cypher system. A very interesting system here, and a second edition of Cypher has just come out recently as well. It is a very crazy, you do what you want system. You definitely have anywhere from noir detectives to sci-fi to fantasy to all kinds of craziness. It's a very interesting system that involves your character has an adjective, a noun, and a verb. I am a crazy ranger who hunts things, who hunts monsters. And so each of those things, the noun is sort of your class. Your adjective and and verb kind of go into what abilities you have based around that class. It's an interesting way to go here, and there's a lot of cool things here, cool things in this system here. And so that's a really fun way. And again, Wuthering's going to be done in the in the Cypher system here. So give that a check out at some point. And again, sometime near future, going to have Zach back on the show here to talk about Wuthering and the design of it and the details around it here. So you'll be seeing that sometime coming up here. But let's jump in. I've seen a lot of comments and a lot of fun, a lot of people talking about different systems here, and I kind of want to roll back up to talk about some different things with things that you've suggested or what you see here. And to go back to Pathfinder, one of the things about that people rave about the Pathfinder thing is the three action economy. That the game system in that way is simplified from other things. That you have three actions. Those actions can be whatever you want them to be. You want to move 3 times, you can move 3 times. You want to move and attack. You want to move, trip somebody and attack. You want to move and cast a spell. You want to stand still and just throw things at people. Your actions are yours to do with whatever you want. So it's an interesting way to go, and idea that it doesn't require you to have this action, this type of action, this type of action, this type of action. It just lets you free up what you do on your turn. So that's kind of a fun way to go, and I do agree that that is something that I definitely have seen some aspects that are a lot that make the game a little bit more free form and fun. So I definitely want to give that little shout out there to Pathfinder Second Edition. So other questions or other things? Yes, as actually mentioned here, Blaze in the Dark, and there's also is a really cool system for troop-based games where you have an organization, be it a bounty hunter group or a mercenary group or a gang of thugs or whatever else of that. It's built around the idea that you have multiple characters, and not only are your characters part of what you build out your troop as well. And your troop advances as your characters advance. So you get a bit of extra abilities like a better hideout or better equipment or NPCs that help you out with things, having a better doctor available to you and things like that. So it's a really cool system, and it's a very simple mechanic there too. It's not very hard to create characters. In fact, it's actually intentionally easy because your characters can get killed or go wander off, and you bring a new one in next time. So it's a fun system there. There's actually a version of that for Star Wars called Scum and Villainy. It's the same idea. You're playing a bounty hunter organization, playing a smuggling operation, or whatever else like that. So there's some different versions of Blades in the Dark out there that are really kind of cool. What else do we see in here? Dark Heresy in the world of Warhammer. Very brutal, very crazy, very like unforgiving game. Um, from what I've only played it very briefly there, and I've heard some stories of folks that have been playing it, going, "Wow, that's if you want a game where you're not likely to live, Dark Heresy is definitely for you." That's a fun one there. Kids on Bikes. Okay. Um, Kids on Bikes is a very light, very easy, straightforward game here. Very similar to Stranger Things. It's the idea of kids running around after school, dealing with all kinds of crazy things, crazy situations there. There's even a version for fantasy called Kids on Brooms, which is very much of a Harry Potter-esque sort of idea there, but the idea of like take kids on bikes but add magic to it. Um, a fun little way to go there. Um, Dusk City Outlaws. Oof. Very cool. It's a board game. It's almost like a board game element there. You have different cards and different associations there. It's meant for a very short campaign. You're basically doing a heist kind of thing like that, and each person has their own abilities based around what they bring to the heist. And it's very narrative in deciding how you are going to help a situation or how you're going to push the plot along, and to kind of get to. And you literally have a limited number of turns before the game is over. And is the heist successful or not? A fun kind of out of the box table game, but a lot of good fun role playing aspects to it. Question from sorry, yeah, why choose one system over another? Really good question. So some things that I would say about choosing a system is if you're not sure what to go for, maybe check out um, some Let's Plays on YouTube. Some like go online and do a search for easy. If you want something very very straightforward, easy getting into, easy fantasy based RPGs. And there'll be some recommendations out there. And then go online and see if you have some video tutorials about how the game is maybe run, maybe even some live play of it to see how the mechanics go. I learned about Kids on Bikes, Kids on Brooms from watching Misfits and Magic on Dimension 20. Watch the system in action, and it was really quick and easy and fun. So if you're looking for something like that, try checking out one of those shows. You don't need to be committed to 120 episodes or even like 30 or 40. You just like watch a couple to see, is this fun gameplay? Is this something I would like to try with my players? If you are looking for recommendations or why choose one system over another, why this might be a good one for you, again, seeing what's out there is kind of the first step. And then seeing what's going to fit more with your style of wanting to run or wanting to play. So, um, uh, so, um, yeah, it's really kind of comes down to what are you looking for in a game? Are you looking for something lighter and fun, looking for a long running kind of thing, or something very, very short? Some of these games you run into are meant for very short gameplay, short campaigns. I've never heard of a Call of Cthulhu campaign. Having a character last through a campaign is almost unheard of in a game like Cthulhu. So, but I'm sure there's options for that out there if you want. But again, it's what are you going for? What are you looking for? And then seeing what options available. I've learned a lot from going to gaming conventions and just trying new games, or having friends recommend a game and trying a session or two out around the table or online or whatever. So when you have an opportunity to try a new game system, give it a try and see if it's fun. If it's something you like, something that's cool, go for it. And bring it to somebody else. So I hope that helps a little bit there. Let's see. Scroll back a little bit here. Let's see who we have here. Good question from Zach. Oh, what system you tried that you never play again based off the system? Oof. I don't think there's any system specifically that I would never ever play again because the system was so bad. I've had some games that have soured me a bit here, but in terms of the games that I've played here, I think I would have to say for me, Mutants and Masterminds as a superhero game, only because the edition that I played and the versions that I was looking at there really wasn't a good push and pull mechanic to it. And so there are other systems that may be better for that genre than that one. I typically am going to shy away from, like I said, I kind of go away from hero system if I have new players or even GURPS if I have new players because it's just overwhelming to people. So it depends on what I'm trying to get out of my game. Um, so I really say it's it's I never had the system turn me off so bad I never want to play it again. It's more, is this going to work for the people I want to play with, or is this going to work for a game in the future, or something or maybe I didn't like it enough to want to run it again. I can say right now, when I'm running here, Battle Stations, my group of friends here that I brought it to, it didn't work out very well, and so it takes the right group of people and the right mindset and the right frame of doing things as opposed to what you want to do or whether that system's going to be right for your situation. So it's you have so many options out there that if something doesn't work, try a different one and just keep going. Don't be discouraged by a bad system or an awkward system, I would say. Um, let's see here. Mention of Legend of Five Rings. Never played that one. I've heard about it a lot, but never actually played it. I hear it's very very a social push and pull, trying to bargain your way in and out of situations. There, it sounded very interesting, but it's not one that I've played before. Let's see, Incarnate. Oh, so little off the topic here, but Dallas says that you're working with Incarnate for making maps. Is there a small town map maker? Incarnate can be used for that. So give it a try. You can kind of scale it down as to how small you want there. There are uh, some map makers out there. If you're just looking for a map, um, check out uh, um, Rusty's maps. You can find them. You can look up Rusty's map there. He has a ton of maps that you can get images of and use in your games. Obviously, they're you want to use them in official like streaming games or anything else that are trying to publish them in the content there. But just using it for your table or using it for your local game there. Rusty's Maps has a lot of great anything from little tiny like farming villages or coastal villages to crazy big cities. He's got some amazing ones out there. So Rusty's Maps, I would give that one a try. Um, let's see here. Yeah, so mentioning Dark Heresy being one that people may not want to give another try there. I did play in a Warhammer Fantasy role play game, and I didn't really like the way that game played out. But I don't know if that was the system or the DM or the GM or just that time it didn't work out. It felt very awkward and forced to me. I would say I really didn't uh uh I didn't really get into it, but I'm not saying that the system was the problem. um, uh Oh, in relation for Dahlia, is there a dungeon maker? I don't know if there is. I'm sure there is out there. If you just do a dungeon maker tool, I have not actually used one. I think I ran across a dungeon randomizer at one point that was kind of cool. Um, so give that a try and see. I think there is some randomized dungeon map makers out there. It was kind of randomized dungeons there. Again, also finding dungeon maps online or even dungeon maps in old modules or something like that and just kind of repurposing them. A lot of fun. There's a lot of fun things out there, depending on how detailed you want to get. Um, what else we got here? Um, some other good mentions. One game I played in, this is Zaxxon here, Eclipse Phase. You want a good, crazy horror game? Eclipse Phase is a very demented game that has potential for some really good horror elements to it there. It's a sci-fi game where you're basically can be put into different bodies where they call shells for various purposes and everything else. And there's some really messed up situations that are involved around there. People being affected by a virus that turns them insane and makes them go crazy. Think a combination of like Cyberpunk and Event Horizon. That kind of crazy demented Clive Barker-esque Hellraiser type things, but with cybernetics. Very interesting dark horror games involved around that. And Zach did point out that Dungeon has a good randomizer for 5e for dungeons. Yes, I have used that briefly. So yeah, very good suggestion there. Um, Dungeon Crawl Classics. There's also Dungeon Crawl Classics is sort of a harken back to old school D&D type of things, but with some crazier dark dice mechanics and just absolutely deadly. It's um, meant to be a crazy. Uh, you throw as many people at a situation as you can and hope that somebody lives to get more powerful as they go along, but they're probably going to die too and have to start over again. Um, it, I kind of picture Dungeon Crawl Classics as sort of your rogue like video games, but in tabletop form. Um, so again, good times for a short running, but for a long running campaign, I don't see the Dungeon Crawl Classics doing really well for you. Um, so yeah, that's but yeah, the one to check out there. There's some other systems out there I've heard of and never tried, but absolutely, give them a try, check them out, go online. If you're ever at a situation where somebody says, "Hey, I want to try running this game," at the very least check it out. If you can watch the game being played and see how it goes, that can give you a little bit of background for yourself there. Maybe you want to try it down the road when you get the opportunity. If you get the opportunity to jump in and play a game, go for it. If you have the time there, like I said, gaming conventions are an awesome way to learn all kinds of new games, either role playing games, board games, whatever. For those that maybe want to have a D&D or sorry, a role playing game uh, sort of feel, but without having to do the plot and everything else. new plug here. I just got this in yesterday, and I'm not sure, but I just got my copy of Frosthaven. If you've seen Gloomhaven, Frosthaven is a sequel to it there. The box is, I am not kidding, this big. I mean, it's huge and has so much stuff in there, but it has a full campaign setting with characters you can unlock. It's a legacy style game with a full scenarios that you run through. Um, so Frosthaven is a fun one if you want to shell out the money there, and you've got some friends that want to go in for a long haul for an RPG style board game. This is maybe a fun way to go for you if you want to have something. And Frosthaven even has an actual narrator that you can download a narrator for the scenarios that'll actually talk to you, actually read the scenarios out for you in a cool voices and stuff like that. Mentions of Cthulhu Tech. Ugh, Cthulhu Tech is such a great idea for a game, but my God, it just is a sloppy execution. Um, we played it. We played a campaign of it, and it was a lot of fun. But at the same time, it was a bit of a mess when it came to game mechanics there. And on a similar vein, if you ever played Palladium and the Rifts system, RIFTS Rifts. It's this crazy mishmash of let's throw everything into one universe and have people with swords fighting people with laser rifles, fighting people with in spaceships, but you have crazy like whatever. I mean, it's just absolutely nuts here. But the problem with Rifts is that you have the disparities in power level that just make it impossible to do anything unless you have the guy in the mech wins because the guy with a sword can't hurt him. So Rifts is a very difficult balancing act of what's going to work and what's not going to work, and it takes a lot of effort on the GM's part to make that game work for you. So, but if you want to give it a try, there Rifts is a crazy multi genre game that can be in all kinds of weird aspects. Um, One of the last ones I want to point out here, because I'm going to put this out there. For those of you that are in here, I want to run an online game at some point, maybe on our channel. We'll see. Feng Shui. This is action movie role playing at its finest. You got the craziest stuff in here. So if you want to play your gun-toting maverick cop and your crazy ghost Chinese sorcerer alongside your actual werewolf. This is the system for it. It is just absolutely over the top. Not meant for long-running campaigns. It's great for one-shots there. So I am definitely looking forward to potentially running some Feng Shui or playing in some Feng Shui if you're out there. Zach um, or some of the guys here. It's a lot of fun. I have my characters in the past there. Jimmy the Junkman James, who literally works in a junkyard and just loves to use improvised weapons or whatever he finds laying around. Through Sven the skateboard Viking, who's a massive Viking guy who uses a titanium skateboard as his weapon, to your maverick kung fu cop. It's just an absolute, yeah. Simeon Fung. It's Feng Shui is an absolute bonkers time for great one shots if you want to give it a shot. If you ever get an opportunity to play it there. I still play the original version out there. There was a second edition one, but it didn't really add much to the game in my opinion. The original game is just fine the way it is. So I would it's not a game for balance. It's not a game for like difficult character creation. It's basically jump in there and go and be as crazy as you want to be. So yeah, we'll check that out at some point here. We'll do some Feng Shui at some point. So again, I would say this. If you find yourself in a rut with games, or if you feel you want to give something else a try, there are so many out there. There are so many options. There are literally, I'm not exaggerating here. I've probably run well over a dozen different systems over the last 40 years I've been playing role-playing games, and I have played in probably dozens more than that. I guarantee I have played in probably at least 20 to 30 different systems, role-playing game systems over the time I've been doing this. So it doesn't hurt to give something new a try. once you've played a number of systems, you sort of get the feel for, oh, this one's that kind of mechanic. Okay. You're going to have commonalities amongst all these different systems there between you're making your test, you're adding an attribute, you're trying to hit a target number. That's going to be the basics of almost any role playing game. What you're adding to your die roll and what type of dice you roll and what the outcomes lead to is what's going to make those games different. But they're all going to have those similarities. And when you get into how difficult a character is to create, how difficult a character is to how difficult it is to navigate the rules within the game, and how difficult is it to develop that character down the road in a campaign type of setting. Your level of crunch, again, pick your level of crunch, pick your level of how difficult it is for you to get into and roll the system there, and pick your genre. Every genre you can possibly think of is represented somewhere in a role playing game. So, any last minute questions? Go ahead and put them up here as I'm wrapping up. As I said, for this idea, I'm going to ask if there's anyone out there that wants to run a game in a different system. Please come on over to House of Discord, our Discord server, House of Gamers, to join in our role playing gamer community. Again, we've got people that want to play games. We have, if you want to run a game, we got players. If you want to try to find a new game of your own, come on over too. But we desperately need game masters to fill out some more games for players that really want to get into things. A lot of eager people out there. And if you have the time and interest there, come on over and join in there. We'll do a quick check-in with you to see if the game's going to work for our style of play. But for the most part, I'm looking to fill out our ranks for a lot more people there, because unfortunately I can't run any more games than I already am, or playing many more games than I already am. But I want to see more options for people out there. So if you're looking for something, come on over to the House of Gamers there and join in there. I'd really love to see more people out there, especially you guys here in the chat. My hometown friends and my online friends, and anyone else out there. Yeah, come on over and join in the fun, and get some new players, get some new games going. So nothing else jumping out here in terms of questions or anything else. So I just want to just kind of wrap it all up here, just saying again, don't be afraid to branch out. Don't be afraid to, and if you want to stick with your D&D games, absolutely, that's your decision. That's your thing. No one can tell you not to do that. And just enjoy your time. It's all about having fun with your friends. And really, if you're having fun, they're having fun. That's all that matters. Everything else out there is just sort of noise and details that are just going to muddy the waters. So just have fun with your game, have fun with your content, have fun with what you want to do. And well, we'll call it there for today, for this week here, guys. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for chatting. You guys have been great. And thanks for coming in to Tumble Take It here. The drinks are on us, and we'll see you again real soon. Saturday for Avarice. We'll be back here next week for another episode of DM&D Chat. Take care. Thanks. Have fun.